Hey, everybody. Keeping up with the headlines right here, YouTube, Facebook, Blair Nightingale with Tradeway coming at you. 6 p.m. every week we do this. I say it every single time. Remember, a lot of our friends, you're going to be watching this on YouTube later, right? Not necessarily with us live. Of course, we'll have lots of folks joining us live tonight as well. But many of you, of course, are watching this at a later date. This is December 4th, 2023. We're going to look into the headlines, what's going on in the markets right now. Kind of an interesting situation in the market. So it'll be interesting. It's an interesting situation, and it'll be important to recognize when this one specific thing happens in the indexes. For my traders out there, we're going to look at what that is. Also, I want to look at something that really helps us break down why do we look at the S&P 500 so much? What is it about the S&P 500? And what are some special things that traders can use and look at to diversify within the index, and some different things that we look at pretty consistently over here at Tradeway? I want to cover that as well tonight. Of course, if you are joining us live, thank you so much for being here. Again, I am your host, Blair Nightingale, and it's a pleasure to be on here with you for one of the last Mondays, not the last, but one of the last Mondays of 2023, if you can believe it. So from us here at Tradeway to everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us once again. A massive 2023 over here at Tradeway. So many amazing new students coming into our community. So thank you guys for that. Thank you for being on here live. Maybe tonight is your first time being with us, or you're watching on that recording and it's your first time. Welcome. We exist here at Tradeway just to help folks just like yourself break down and understand the confusing world of finance, actively looking to invest and trade in the U.S. stock market. Who cares about your money more than you do, right? Nobody. So you should be educated and equipped so that you can, at the very least, have a powerful conversation, be a powerful participant, I like to say, in your finances. When I came into this community in 2015, I got off the mission field, ministry school, music background. I did not know a lot of what I now consider to be very basic things about stewardship of money, wealth building, and of course, actively looking into trading using the US stock market. So anybody can start from knowing nothing. You can learn, right? You can learn, and again, have better conversations, be a more powerful participant instead of necessarily just handing over our goals and our finances even to somebody else managing them, where we don't really know what they're doing. Okay. And that's not to say that we don't ever have managers. I'm not saying that, but let's have an idea of how, at the very least, to have a conversation with them that is powerful. And beyond that, looking at, are there some skills I can learn to manage some things myself, trade some things myself? Yes, of course, we go through a process to learn how to do that, and there are different stages, but it's something that is a learnable skill set. So that's what we do here at Tradeway. Again, thank you so much to everybody being on here this year. With that said, okay, I'm heading over to Charts by Tradeway. I'm going to start out, we're going to go over to the index, which we're going to look at the S&P 500. Not a half, this is not my intention tonight. It's not my initial item that I want to cover tonight. But, let's just look at this nice little pattern here, nice reversal here on 3M. Okay. We look for patterns like this. We talked about this recently. Pattern. For the trader, we use technical patterns here. It's what we do. We don't just use one kind of strategy. Okay. We're not always buying stock and looking for the market to go up. It's only one strategy, one tool. Okay. In some environments, it's not a very high probability approach to the markets. There are other things we can do. But here's a nice looking uptrend, right? Pulls back into the line, goes up. Just for fun, I'm going to go, what's the next one in there? Yeah, earnings report. I want to also show you this. While we're looking at patterns, why not? Key, beautiful, right? We talked about this one in our program last week, just as examples that we go out and look for patterns and just watch them, follow them, right? This is the only uptrend that I personally pulled out and put on our internal community pages last week. And here we go. This was a nice one, right? This one worked. Not every single one always goes from the floor to the ceiling. Okay. We have to learn to manage them when they're winners. We have to learn to manage them when they're expenses. That's trading. But this was a nice, strong move up. Okay. So the market, here's what I was saying earlier is interesting, and it will be important for us to know. Notice the box. Okay. We were in this long-term downtrend. We broke out of it. We were just screaming hot. And then at some point, we just went sideways. Friday looked like, okay, we're actually going to break out of this box that now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and today 8 sessions later, we're still in that box, okay? Just sideways, not really going anywhere. Some patterns, for example, we just looked at KEY, key. That meant that there wasn't a really huge swing back and forth in the market, a lot of volatility in the market, so that they are the patterns in many examples. I say it this way, it's almost like they're allowed to just play out, right? They're not dragged down by some of that volatility. So this actually can be a good thing. However, as it has been consolidating, which is what it has been doing, even to see it break out of that on Friday, only to come right back into it today and close inside of that box, we're really just looking for a breakout. Same thing. Are we going to close below that 10-day moving average right there, around 45.50 on the S&P, 45.45 on the screen right now, or getting above? Same thing, 45.75 area, something like that, breaking out of there, certainly beating Friday's high, okay, grinding higher. The overall trend here, guys, still bullish. Why do I say that? Well, because it's above those stacked moving averages. Those averages are still pointed upwards, okay? It's not closing below the moving averages. I want you to hear two things right now because I'm giving you information about the specific chart, but I'm telling you things that you can apply to any chart that you look at where we gauge momentum. I know I've said this many times here on Market Monday. Sometimes there's an argument with trading to say, oh, traders think they can use a chart to know the future. No, traders don't use the chart to try to know the future. They use the chart to gauge momentum, to use the chart to assess probability through pattern. And then they understand how to apply good money management, risk return, and different factors like that so that they are good risk managers, okay? That is what we use the chart for. In this case, we're still, again, above those averages, pointed up. There is a quick response from the buyers when the market sells off, right? Gap down today. Let's zoom in a little bit. This actually gapped down today and moved right to the 10-day moving average. If you're not paying attention to the moving averages, while traders do vary the time frames they set those moving averages to, by and large, a 5-day, a 10-day, a 20-day, a 50-day, that'll be pretty good for you right there just to watch those major levels. Sometimes for different reasons, traders will bring it into maybe a 9-day, a 21, and so on. We can tweak those a little bit depending on some of the tools that traders use for charting. However, pretty standard, we're going to look at 5, 10, 20, 50 here right off the 10-day today. Not a massive move up, but a convincing recovery right from that level, right? So this is something that happens on other charts, right? Especially when they are in strong bullish patterns. Even though it's consolidating, it just hasn't been able to break that level. You can see it's just going sideways until finally it actually hit the 10-day moving average here. maybe this is the beginning of a move up. If somebody went out today, found a nice pattern at support, getting some buying momentum, seeing the S&P 500 bounce at the 10-day here would give them some extra confirmation that they've got momentum heading in their direction. Of course, it doesn't guarantee that the stock market will continue up tomorrow. Okay. But it does give us a good setup to begin to ask the next set of questions that we would ask if we find a chart that we like. Okay. So that said, S&P holding up nicely. Now, if I go over here, NASDAQ looking a lot weaker today in the beginning. What happened? Hits the 20-day, not the 10, hits the 20-day. Nice reversal here. Now, this one's a little bit weaker because we got below the consolidation. The gap line here, right, was part of the low almost, but it's definitely below those highs. Okay, it's broken out of there, and it's got the 5 and 10-day stacked on top. So I do think as far as technology goes, the overall market, I think it's worth, I've said this on here many times too, it's worth keeping your eye on technology because those stocks are so significantly weighted, particularly in the S&P 500. You look at our episode we did on the Magnificent Seven now some time ago, and you get a pretty good idea that the S&P 500 sometimes is a little bit more like the S&P 7 instead of the S&P 500, right? Because you take those 493 stocks out of the S&P, and about a month ago, you're looking at an index that's about flat, not quite, little up from flat year over year. That's pretty wild to think about it. So you can always go back and watch that episode right there on YouTube to see that. However, here I'm pointing out a little bit weaker, but also nice move right off the 20-day, right? So it's definitely seeing the buyers step in when one of those levels comes up. That's one of the things we want to gauge. How hungry are those buyers? We're talking short-term trading here. So these are some things that are helpful to look at. Okay, of course, it's all combined with good patterns, risk management skills. We teach the beginning, the foundation of those in our step one. Start your journey right here at Tradeway. Of course, we're coming into the holiday season here. We'll continue to be here for you through the season, but I know we'll be doing another step one, start your journey, coming up early in the new year. You can always go to tradeway.com and you can find the dates for that. So that said, S&P, why do we follow the S&P, right? Andrea is on with us. I'm just checking the chat here. Okay, Andrea, I'm going to answer that question in a minute. Okay, I love it. By the way, if you guys want to send in questions, you're with us on Facebook, YouTube. That's the beauty, the benefit of being on with us live, right? So if you have any questions, just like Andrea, please send that on over and I'd be happy to dive into it. Andrea, I will answer that for you in just 1 second here. Why the S&P 500? Okay, why the S&P 500? Why do we watch it? It's not the only index. Okay, is it special for some reason? Well, there's always pros and cons, but particularly the S&P 500 is a nice broad-based index, okay? It's not an index that has the most stocks in it, okay? Other indexes have more stocks, right? Not the Dow Jones, right? That's the smaller one with 30, but the S&P 500 does still have a broad-based look, 11 sectors of the US economy, okay? I was telling somebody the other day something called an ETF, okay? An exchange traded fund. Very popular right now. It's a stock that you can buy, and it ultimately it's like a financial product that you and I can go buy, and it's sold to us like a stock in shares, okay? There will be a company that has a significant amount of assets under management, and then they sell these ETFs where we can find an ETF for just about anything, guys. We can go in, let's go back to our chart, gold ETF, boom, gold. We can look for oil ETFs. We can look for futures. We can look for all kinds of commodities. We can look for, somebody came up to me at a live event. I believe we were in Colorado Springs last month. And she said, I want to invest I want my money to be exposed to Israel in some way. Well, we can go out and we can look at Israel ETFs. Now, I'm not suggesting we go and do that. It's not a good investment just because it's connected to something that we may care about, right? We have to do our diligence beyond that. However, you can find an ETF for just about anything. And when it comes to the S&P 500, I mentioned it's broken down into 11 sectors of the US economy. So it gives us this broad look. They're not all weighed the same. Not every one of them gets the same amount of votes or weight in the index. Tech is the heaviest one, as I mentioned earlier. But you'll notice, look, tech, media, health, consumer discretionary, financial, industrial, consumer staples, right? Energy, real estate, utilities, and materials. And then, of course, it breaks it down here in the bottom to show the S&P 500 as a whole, then the different sectors, and then the industries within those sectors. So there's the technology, right? And then within that, you could go hardware, software, semiconductors. All right, let's look at semiconductors. All right, look at all the different semiconductor companies, right? So it breaks it down for us. And then, of course, we can go directly to the stock. But what if you want to go out and you're looking at a stock in a particular sector and you want to see, well, how's that sector doing as a whole? Okay, we've looked at this on here before. It's just been some time since we did it. XLE. Now, these are the spider ETFs, okay? So this gives us a general, I'm going to say it is an overview, a look at how that sector is doing at that particular point in time, okay? This is not this is a look specifically at the ETF of the energy sector, okay? You can always go to, actually, I'm going to see if I can just pull it up here. Right here. Boom. I don't think y'all can see this page right now. So I'm going to share the tab, sectorspiders.com. I'm going to pop that in the chat. Might as well show that to you. This is cool, right? This just gives us some insight. It's just a tool, okay? There are other tools. This is a tool. You can come in here and you can look around this whole circle, the 11 sectors of the S&P 500, okay? I can come in here and I can go to whichever one I want. Let's go to real estate. Why not? It tells us this is how much the weight of that particular industry is in the S&P 500, in particularly for this ETF, right? The SPY, when we talk about that, that's from the same source. So if I go over here, and now I go to, let's find it on here, technology. It's the next one down. Notice the weight is way heavier. So the influence it has, okay, over this particular ETF is significantly higher than the one we just looked at, which of course was real estate. So technology is a big deal, right? It makes a big, in fact, I've seen in the news the last couple of days when tech stocks have fallen, you see the NASDAQ went deeper, it pulled the market down, okay? So what we can do is we can go in here. Let's go back to our screen here, and we can chart out these sector ETFs. XLF. Okay. How's financials doing? Looking pretty darn good, right? If we see great patterns in some of these sectors, maybe we go out and look for stocks in those particular sectors. If I'm looking for a pattern that's uptrending along with the market, and I'm going out and I'm looking at an energy stock that's in a downtrend, right? Or even an energy stock that looks like it's maybe channeling or even beginning an uptrend, but then the industry itself, or I should say the sector itself, is tanking or looks really weak, then I may think twice about what I'm going to do with that specific stock. Okay. I'm getting a little bit more insight. Okay. These particular ETFs, you've got quite a few of them that you can do, of course, when you get into the industries. But the sectors, as we said, there's 11 of them, and you can find them right at that site. Okay. So it's just an interesting little tool to go in there. Yeah. Okay, Peter, I see your question too. It's an interesting thing to be able to go in there and look at, right? To give us an idea. We can chart these particular sectors to give us an idea of what's hot and what's not. And of course, we've done this on here before. I can go into charts by Tradeway back to the homepage, and I'm just going to get an overview. Let's not be on day though. Let's look for the last 3 months, right? What's really hot? Finance. Well, we just saw that. Okay. Finance is hot. So what might I do? Well, then I'll just go down here and go, all right, let's look in the different sub industries here of finance and see, are there some great patterns that are ripping higher there? Okay. Instead of just sort of, looking for anything, we're already zeroing in on something that's overperforming, outperforming other sectors in the S&P 500. It is a nice broad based, right? We've got large cap, mega cap stocks in the S&P 500. So this is definitely one that we should be paying attention to, okay? It's not the only one we're paying attention to, but it certainly is a big one. Now, I'm going to go back to my question here. Peter, is there a ticker we can type in for the Magnificent Seven stocks? No, there's not an index that I am personally aware of that is specifically something we can invest in that's just those 7 stocks. Although, to be honest, it wouldn't shock me if there was an ETF of something like that that emerged at some point. To my knowledge, that doesn't exist. You can always go out, Google them, find them. I've posted them on here before, and you can chart them, track them, right? I have a short list, a watch list in my charting that just looks for just those stocks, right? It follows those, I should say, right? So you can add those in there. Now, Andrea said, I'm new, right? Where on the charts by Tradeway does it show that those are 1-day candles? So we go back to the chart. We got to go to the chart view. Otherwise, we're not looking at any candles. Now, notice right up top here. These are all the time frames. Now, I can click this plus symbol, and it's going to pull up a whole bunch other time frames. Okay, and I can break them into different subdivisions. Okay, that's a little bit more complex there. But what's at the top here, okay, is how long am I really looking at on the chart? I'm now looking at a year, 6 months. But the bottom letter there tells me the time frame of the candlestick. At the top, it's telling me what the time frame of the entire view is. In the bottom right, it's what the candlestick is. So the D, of course, is for daily. So there's a 6-month daily. Okay, your candles are daily. There's a 1-year daily. Now, we've got a 1 year here too, but what does it say? Well, it's a weekly. 1 year weekly. Okay, I also will sometimes use a 3-year weekly. We maybe don't see a specific thing like, let's go ahead and drop that in there. And then even, oh, let me get another line here, guys. We're going to do that. Okay. I maybe didn't notice that, okay, when I was looking only at the 6-month daily. What did I see? Well, I just saw the chart ripping higher, okay? The 1 year, okay, I get a little bit more data, but hey, when I go out and I check that 3-year, actually, we're in a pretty significant resistance zone right now. Now, maybe we continue up. We may break out of that, but that's pretty good to know. So when I'm looking at a new sector, when I'm looking at a new stock, okay, I may want to go out and just quickly peek at a longer time frame. And so I can see, oh, there's something there that I hadn't seen, right? I'm layering it up. So what am I doing today? I'm giving you a couple of layers. The main thing we want to do is just go out and find those great patterns like we started off with tonight, right? We got to learn to do that, draw lines, and then apply the skills to build an actual trade. But what we want to do is have some other tools out there that can help us, okay? Understand, what's the momentum, what's happening in there, okay? So with that said, we want to look over here on, what's coming up in the news this week, okay? Sorry, you can't see it. That's okay. Let me take that off there. Perfect. All right. So, coming up this week, not a super heavy week, big Fed news, anything like that. Jerome Powell spoke on Friday. That certainly did send the market higher. It finally broke out of that consolidation, partially because of him speaking. He said that Wall Street probably shouldn't get so excited. I mentioned this in the last few weeks, that they shouldn't get quite as excited as they are that the Fed is going to cut interest rates next year, because he said, we're not that close. They kind of feel like they were calling his bluff. Like, yeah, he can say that, but I think he's becoming more accommodative, and he's probably going to do it. Come next year, he's probably going to do it. So they are pretty bullish on that regard. That's what drove it up. That kind of news, not this week. We're going to have some employment stuff all week long. Looking at the jobs numbers, that'll be important, particularly Thursday morning. There'll be those jobless claims coming out. So there's always data, you guys. There's things coming out. But mainly that'll be one of the biggest ones is employment jobs Thursday into Friday. So we'll keep an eye on that. But apart from that, nothing major. And that's a good thing, right? We don't mind that, because, typically when the Fed is just, it seems like sometimes the Fed is just constantly, let me zoom in. See, now I'm on a weekly chart, right? The Fed is constantly messing it up, man, just creating major volatility. Sometimes that's a good thing, but when it's constant, it can create challenge. So they're a little quieter right now, at least getting into December. Let's see if we get a nice little move right off the 10-day here, right? Looking for a move up into Friday's high and beyond from there. See if we can get that. I'd like to see a little bigger reset in the indexes. Historically, December sees what we call what Wall Street, and certainly Wall Street media, likes to call the Santa Claus rally. So we'll see. We'll see if we get a strong move into the end of the year. Don't be believing that the market has to do a Santa Claus rally. Go out and be buying a bunch of stock and calls just because you heard that there's something called the Santa Claus rally. We want to know that the market is actually trending and making the moves we need it to see. But historically, kind of fun to talk about. That is something that has happened. So we will see. Of course, as I mentioned, we're not done here. We're going to be back next Monday night right here to help you understand what's coming for the week, what you need to do, drop some hints, not some hints so much as some tips to help you improve your trading and just understand what it is that this is really all about. Guys, appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. And we're going to see you next time right here on Market Monday. And good night. Thank you.